Hi, friends. Welcome to the Substack. My name is Dean. That is Zev. We're talking about 22-minute podcasts here on the FiveStack. We should keep the FiveStack to 22 minutes. Busy
Not
people, busy
possible.
world, dude. Busy
Not
people, busy
possible.
world. I
Not
know.
with you. There's too much good stuff coming out of your head and your mouth for us
Am
to
I too
possibly.
verbose? Is that the thing?
No. There's no such thing. You're just too brilliant and too funny and too smart to possibly try containing just 22 minutes. So,
It's
I'm
a nice way
thrilled
of
that we
saying
could.
I yammer, is what you're saying.
You filled airtime. When I first started in radio, the most important thing that you had to learn was how to fill dead air.
Yeah.
Boy, do you fill dead air well. So,
Yeah, I think it's a problem, actually. I remember when I was a kid, I'm like, I can't have silence. Silence was like no good. I just
do you
was
do
one
that
of
in
those
real
things.
life? I do that
Yeah,
in
yeah,
real
yeah.
life.
Yeah, I don't like silence. Silence makes me uncomfortable, so I just fill the void with my voice and the odd bubbly in a cocktail glass. Right
I
there.
do that
There
all
you
the
go.
time. It can be really annoying for some people who just have had enough of you talking.
I know but you know what it is for me? It's like you grow up in radio. Dead air is like these two terrible words that you hear all the time. Never have dead air. Don't leave any air. It was like, and I'm like, what about an effective pause? When I grew up in radio, and they're like, no, effective pauses are stupid. And I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, whatever. So I need to get comfortable with effective pauses and dead air like this. Like that, like
It's
I'm
so
just
uncomfortable,
uncomfortable.
though.
I
It's
start
just
right, like
uncomfortable.
you just
Yeah.
stop talking.
One of us has to jump in.
No, stop talking.
Okay.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Like I
Yeah.
can't even go 2 seconds. Right, it's just who
That's
I
why we're
am.
doing this job. That's why we're both radio kids.
Hi, Andrea. Hi, everybody, for joining. Great to see hundreds of people here already. We've don't make it weird, constitutional patriot. Don't worry, we'll try not to. Busy day today. Constitution's under attack. Speaking of constitutional weirdness, we've got Substack reporters getting deported now. We've got a full alarm, 12 alarm blaze when it comes to Trump's health. We'll talk about that. G7 wrapped up. We'll talk about that. And you have a few other things, Zev. Where do you want to start
There
today,
are a
my
few other
friend?
things, and I just realized I accidentally knocked out a story that needs to be there. But we'll
Well, you
introduce it.
shouldn't.
We'll put it back in there as we get to it, as we get through this. But I do want to start with this really interesting thing that's come out of Hungary. There are very few
Mm.
allies that Vladimir Putin really counts on more than Viktor Orban. And the breaking news out of Hungary is that there's a new poll out today that shows that he is about to lose in the next election, or potentially lose in the next election, to opposition leader Peter Magyar. The latest polling has 51% to 36% in favor of Magyar. The former Orban loyalist turned fierce critic has captured younger voters fed up with authoritarianism and Russian ties and threatening to eliminate Putin's loudest voice inside the EU institutions. And of course, this will be a big blow to Donald Trump, too. If this happens, he supports Donald Trump endlessly and also hosts that CPAC conference once a year. So this is a big deal. I mean, Orban is out of the Kremlin orbit. That's a devastating loss for the Kremlins. That hasn't happened yet, but we're looking like we're heading there.
Yeah, when a European country decides to get rid of its Putin-aligned leader, the rest of the world does backflips. You saw what happened in Romania,
Yeah.
where the Romanian Putin candidate almost won prior to another Romanian Putin candidate getting arrested with a whole bunch of Russian money in his basement, and there's a whole bunch of fucking visas and illegal work permits and stuff like that. And Hungary's a bit of a different case because Hungary is really one of Europe's first modern day Christian nationalist nations run by, a Christian nationalist strongman who really sort of gave Donald Trump that sort of populist playbook. And the idea that, yeah, you can take over universities, you can get rid of Harvard, you can get rid of Oxford, something that Viktor Orban did a wonderful job of. And he's very, very good friends, just a little Canada tie, with Stephen Harper, the former prime minister of this country, who is a member of this organization called the International Democratic Union, which is international, not democratic. However, it is a union. It's just a whole bunch of neocon assholes that get together in this globalist movement who, it's just fucking crazy that everybody loves these guys and hates globalists in the WWF when they're worshiping the IDU and people in it like Stephen Harper and Viktor Orban and Russia and in India, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But Viktor Orban's in serious trouble. He now is down 16 points to a former loyalist in his own party. He is going, a young dude, charismatic dude who's like, hey, we can't be friends with Russia. We need to get away from Russia. We need to get away from imperialism. We need to embrace democracy. We need to go full force into the EU. We need to admit Ukraine to NATO and the European Union. Ta-da, 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 ta-da. And Hungary has been that holdout vote in every EU vote when it comes to sanctions. And Putin has his hooks in that fat fuck. He really, really
It really
does.
does.
Pardon the language, but that fat fuck, Viktor Orban, is an opportunist. And every time it comes to him getting that sweet EU grant money for roads and infrastructure, he suddenly right sizes himself so he can pay all the people that he's been paying off all year. Viktor Orban is a terrible fucking human being who deserves nothing but a 20 to 30 point loss and to be sent to the fucking lockers for the rest of his life. They call him Mini Trump. Even though he looks like he's a statesman, he definitely is not. And Hungary is in for a rip if the incumbent wins and this gentleman loses, the guy who's up against Orban right now, because he's got such a huge lead. People are now talking about whether or not Orban's going to fix things at the polls so that he can
Well,
stay in power. So there you
he
go.
might try. The thing is, Hungary is now officially the EU's poorest nation. And that's all happened under Orban. I mean, the reality of it is these authoritarian rulers suck at running economies. They
Yeah.
don't do good under capitalistic rules. They don't care about capitalism, as we've seen here in the United States. And so the reason he's actually getting turfed out of power is because he's, Russian, because he's, not the nicest guy in the world. But it's also the economy. The economy is stupid. That's exactly what it is. And because he can't run an economy the way it needs to be run in order to compete with other European nations, it means that his entire nation is in decline. It means that unemployment is really high. And it means that they have nothing to hold on for, no hope to hold on for. And it's exactly the same fate. MAGA people, let this be a caution to you. This is what's happening in America. In just a few years, you can go from being a up and coming great European nation to being the poorest in the lot and suffering. And your career as a politician, in his case, could be well over.
Let's just point it out. I don't have a problem with ideology, although if you identify as a human being according to a political ideology, I immediately discount everything that comes out of your mouth. Like if you say I'm conservative, I'm like, oh, okay. If you say I'm liberal, I'm like, yeah. Whatever. Like I just don't trust you. But let me just point something out. The worst run countries in the world are run by authoritarians or neoconservatives. In the case of the worst run provinces in Canada that are being run into the fucking financial ground, they're all run by conservatives. Red states in the United States. The reason why literacy is like a fourth, fifth grade level, they're the poorest fucking states in the United States of America, is because they're run by fucking conservatives. And I don't have an anti-conservative, anti-liberal, anti-socialist, anti-Marxist bent. I don't care. I think that anybody that uses their political designation as a way to identify their personality, who they are and where they are, I think is the weakest shit on the planet. But it goes without saying, you look at Hungary being the poorest country in the EU after being kettled by Viktor Orban for the last 10, 12 years. And you look at every red state, you look at the United States of America right now with a negative GDP growth number. You look at every province and every red state that is currently underwater. In Canada, it's Alberta and Saskatchewan. Absolutely deadly places to live when it comes to crime rates, when it comes to measles, when it comes to vaccination rates, when it comes to literacy rates, when it comes to education. Conservative run provinces. And it's no different anywhere else in the world because that ideology just breeds selfishness. It breeds oligarchy. It breeds greed, corruption, et cetera, et cetera. So think about that the next time you identify as a red state or a conservative. You're the fucking worst of the worst. It's been borne out and continues to, and Hungary's a great case study for that.
There's a reason economies do better under democratic governments in the United States than under Republican governments, and that's because they run economies better. Speaking of Russian puppets, Trump has excluded intelligence chief Tulsi Gabbard from Iran deliberations after she contradicted his nuclear claims and posted an anti-war video. This is the same time that Pentagon officials have told him that America's most powerful bunker buster bomb probably can't destroy Iran's deep underground Fordo nuclear facility. Experts briefed Trump that only a tactical nuclear weapon could completely eliminate the 300-foot deep site. That's why he's now saying he'll decide within 2 weeks. Whenever he says he decides within 2 weeks means he has no clue what he's doing. He's just going to think about things for 2 weeks because he's obviously been told these bombs that he hoped would destroy the facility, they ain't going to work, and he can't throw a nuclear bomb at them.
Mm. Yeah, interesting because there's two different parts of that story. Tulsi Gabbard, who's on the outs, the DNI, who's now on the outs with Donald Trump, who weeks before he decided that he was going to say that, oh, yeah, Iran's got nukes. They're working on it. They're so close. She stood in front of the Senate and Congress and is like, yeah, there's no way they're going to be able to create a nuclear bomb. They don't have the capability. Iran's nowhere near it. This is weeks before the whole thing erupted with Israel, weeks before. And then, a week ago, she puts out this, nuclear Cold War video, begging the world to kind of chill out. And that pissed off Donald Trump. And this is before Israel struck Iran. And somehow she's run afoul. I mean, she's a moron. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard's a captured Russian asset and a complete fucking moron and way out of her depth. And I get it. But Donald Trump hired her. And now she's on the outs because of something she did that upset him because he's now taken a different course. It's fucking hilarious to me.
Well,
like, what are we talking about here? I know she's beholden to him, but he's upset because of revisionist history. Like, he's going to fire her because she did something that upset him because she did it before he got a chance to change his mind and decide to attack Iran, which looks very much imminent at this point. Some say by this weekend. It's fucking wild that nobody is having that conversation about Tulsi Gabbard. Not that I give a shit at what happens to Tulsi Gabbard. It's just somehow she's run afoul. It would be like, you saying, hey, Dean, let's listen to your podcast from 2 weeks ago. And I go, okay. And then you start listening to it and you're like, okay, stop the tape, Dean. I told you not to talk about that subject. And I'd say, yeah, but you told me that yesterday. And you're like, I don't care. I don't care. You've still done something wrong. And then you play the tape again and you hear something and you're like, what did I just tell you? I'm like, dude, you just told me that today. Like it's the exact same scenario, an exact same course.
But what we're seeing is the breakup. We're seeing Putin and the rest of the coalition within the MAGA movement is breaking up. And Tulsi Gabbard is beholden to Putin. Putin is desperately trying to stop any escalation against his ally, Iran. And he is finding it hard to get Donald Trump to do what he wants him to do at this point, because Trump seems to be listening to Bibi or somebody else at this point. So that breakup is really evident. And I think we saw it in the Tucker Carlson thing that we saw yesterday with Cruz. And we're seeing it now with Tulsi Gabbard. She's so beholden to Russia. And she was probably given that position as a gift to Russia. And now it's all coming home to roost as she is at odds with the presidency, which is, potentially at war with Iran.
Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? Having Russian assets and completely unqualified people in your cabinet would be bad business.
I thought he was wholly owned by Russia. Apparently, he's owned by all these other entities too. So we'll see who ends up winning. It'll be like the survival of the fittest, who survives.
It's just 2 weeks thing, dude. He's like, he gives the same people. He says it's 2 weeks. Just give me 2 weeks. Yeah. Like, it's been 3.5 weeks since his last 2 weeks, and then today he's like, yeah, I'll let you know more about Russia and Iran in 2 weeks. I haven't decided if I'm going to attack Iran. Give me 2 weeks. It's his famous 2 weeks.
Remember his infrastructure policy?
Because. Yeah, but dude, he passes the buck. Yeah, exactly. I got a concept. 2 weeks. Yeah. He passes the buck until he knows where he can take his hook that's coming out of his asshole and what wagon he can attach it to.
Yeah,
like that. That's he just waits the last second. Goes, they look like a winner. Bang. They look like a winner. Bang. That's all Donald Trump is. He's the most performative asshole you'll ever see in your entire life, specifically in politics.
Well, let's talk about the number. This was not the original number 3 story here, but I'm going to throw it in here because I'm interested in your reporting of the last few days about his health. Dean Blundell has been doing the most incredible reporting about the guy's got some weird wound on the back of his neck. His hands are swollen. He looked like he couldn't stand up to meet the Juventus football club today when they came to visit him. I mean, he's not doing very well. We've commented on this before, but the very latest that you're talking about on your Substack is quite explosive. I mean, this guy is not really fit for office right now.
No, he's not like I'll give you an example. So a few months ago, I get a phone call and it's my dad, and he's like, "Hey, we got to put grandma in a home." She's 92, lovely lady, but she's fell and hurt her hip, and she's fallen a couple times. She needs extra help, and so we got to put her in a home. I'm like, all right. So I flew out, and what I saw was like one of those things where it's like, wow, the change is like astronomical. If you watch a video from Donald Trump's first term as president, 4 years before, being installed again,
Mhm.
the decline is incredible. His speech pattern, how low energy he is. Prior to the G7, we got wind, which made kind of viral news that they would figure out a way to not stay at the G7 for the entire term, which was 3 days, 72 hours, right? Some leaders were there for 4 days for pre-meetings. He wasn't even there for fucking 18 hours.
Wow.
Like he
Yes.
flew in, flew out, et cetera, et cetera. Disheveled, slurring. We've seen the videos. We've heard the accounts coming out of the G7. The hiding behind the Oval Office desk for leaders, world leader pressers that he's been
Mhm.
doing, hasn't left the White House, hasn't gone on many, if any, trips at all, unless the fucking Pope died, which, hey, you got to go to that. And was only in Canada for, like I said, 18, 20 hours, if that.
Yeah.
So he started, months ago, people started to kind of wonder exactly what was going on with him. And White House aides, and it's not so quiet anymore, are literally trying to hide his decline from people in real time. So, there's a picture taken at the G7 that had a picture of his hand that was so bruised and discolored, so much worse than it's ever been. And a bruise usually goes away in a couple weeks. This has been a
Mhm.
solid month that this
What
bruise
is
has
that? Why
languished
is
and
that
gotten worse.
happening?
No, we don't know. We don't know, but it's discolored. The skin looks disgusting. It looks like he's got flesh eating disease on the back of his hand. Um, and then you fast forward to the flag raising incident yesterday, where he came back to the White House early, and he's like, "I came back to erect two flagpoles. I'm going to put up. We're going to. It's called a lifting. I don't want to say the word erection." He
Mm.
said that. You can read all about it on my Substack. Dean Blundell
Loose. He's such a loser.
substack.com.
Yeah.
Um, and what followed was this impromptu press conference
Mm.
where he was so out of it. He was so inappropriate. He was slurring, again, disheveled. He didn't know what he was talking about. He turned around at one point at the flag construction guys and he's like, "Any of you guys legal immigrants? Because if you're illegal, you're in deep shit." Like just the most absurd. Then
Right.
he turned around and he started talking about Biden and then Iran. And then he's like, "I'm not telling you when we're going to strike Iran, but look at that flagpole. It's tapered. It might snap in the wind." Like just the most bizarre shit you've ever seen in your life coming out of Donald Trump. And I mean, this is saying something. Like,
Mm.
what I saw yesterday, and there's more, but what I saw yesterday, just in terms of his behavior, was unhinged at best.
Mm.
And then a picture started to kind of make its way around, and I saw a picture of him talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, who's absolutely fucking hilarious, by the way. And if you zoom in on the back of his neck, there is some kind of white patch, square white patch that kind of covers the back middle part of his neck, kind of goes up to his hairline. He's got a hat on, and they've strategically placed the hair around this patch. It looks like a post-op patch. Looks like he's wearing a wire. It's just like an EKG patch on the back of his
Mm.
neck. It's the weirdest thing in the world. And then you combine that with his catheter picture. You combine with it what we know, which is like severe incontinence, which is why he can't leave the White House. And those questions about his physical and mental health for sure, because of what we saw, but now physical health are in overdrive today, and people are starting to ask some very uncomfortable questions. And you're going to start seeing a whole bunch more people ask some very uncomfortable questions at very inopportune times, because the wide belief is that Donald Trump is very, very sick.
I wonder what that means in terms of the cabinet. I mean, especially if some cabinet members are sort of turning away from him, whether they'll start considering the 25th Amendment as he's really not very competent right now. And if he's already isolated and alienated so many of his cabinet members, maybe there might be a move to replace him, which would, is quite conceivable considering this lot. I mean, they're not exactly loyal to anybody.
No, no, and you know what? I haven't dug into that part of the conversation. Whether or not the vultures are starting to kind of circle the wagon, but it's interesting because some of the conversations that I have had with people, in Trump's orbit is that, they can't wait.
Mm,
Like they cannot wait for this guy to have an episode. They can't,
yeah,
like one guy said, "Hey, listen, dude, we're literally one stroke away." In the way that the rate that this guy's going, no sleep,
yeah.
can't speak to his drug use. I know a lot of people have. I can't. His inability, his diet, how unhealthy he is, how
Just the
hard
pressures
he
of the
goes.
job. I mean, it's a tough job for
Yeah.
anyone, never mind an 80-year-old, that's got all these issues going on.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. It's this quiet, like saying in the White House, apparently. It's like, we're one stroke away. I'm
yeah.
like, okay,
Well,
well, you
that
might not be
leads
far. Yeah.
that's Vance territory, which I'm not sure is less terrifying or more terrifying. I mean, that guy's obviously not equipped to be the president of the United States. So,
No.
um, you know, I don't know what's more terrifying. I guess Trump isn't either. The number two story is a story about a Substack journalist that was deported by immigration officials. Australian writer Alistair Kitchen became the first journalist explicitly deported from America for his published work on Substack. This is after CBP agents detained him at LAX for documenting Columbia University's protests on his Substack. His 12-hour ordeal reveals sophisticated surveillance systems, screening, and lots of questioning, interrogation under terrible conditions, asking him what his beliefs were around Palestine and Israel. This is, it is a student as well, so I can understand why this would fit into their policy. Although it's not understandable why someone who's documenting the truth is not allowed into the country. But this is also a journalist working as an independent journalist on a Substack. We are beginning to see this attack on the media really take shape in a way that we were anticipating it would, but it's really happening. First, we had the 60 Minutes lawsuits, and then the resignation of the president of CBS News, and then the executive producer of 60 Minutes because of these new restrictions about what they could report and how they could report at 60 Minutes. Then we see the Terry Moran thing where he got fired for calling Stephen Miller a world class hater, which anyone would say he is. And now you've got this situation where you've got a guy who's studying and working here and is now deported back to Australia after an ordeal which involved being in a cell with other detainees. They could not talk to each other. They did not have any way of communicating with the outside world except for a single phone call to the consulate. The only thing they had for warmth in this cold room was just a blanket. These are ridiculous conditions for someone who's basically reporting the truth. I mean, there's nothing in his reporting that was egregious or false or inflammatory. He was just part of this protest. He wrote about it.
Yeah, you've got a great article about it too at narrative.org. America just deported its first Substack journalist for telling the truth. Alistair Kitchen's ordeal caps a systematic assault on press freedom that's reshaping American journalism. He brought up Terry Moran, of course, 60 Minutes, George Stephanopoulos, that lawsuit that they
Yeah.
capitulated for. It's interesting because in the story, you really sort of put together this gentleman's ordeal, but you also provide some background into, this, how systematic, as you point out, the silencing of certain voices that are critical of the Trump administration are. Terry Moran, in his case, several weeks ago, does an interview with Trump where Trump legitimately just embarrasses himself because he's talking to someone who's smarter than him.
Right.
Fast forward 3-4 weeks, he puts out an innocuous tweet about Stephen Miller just being a hater, which he is, like a hater. That's all he said. The guy's just a world
Yeah.
class hater.
Yeah.
And fuck, he gets fired. 28 years. 28
Yeah.
years
One of the best journalists they
at
have
ABC
there. I mean, really, it's
without
top notch.
fucking question. And so now let's talk about Alistair Kitchen. He was deported, from what I understand, for a couple of reasons. One, and this makes me laugh, is they had actually flagged him prior to him showing up.
Yeah, it's the new
Is
surveillance thing. Yeah.
the surveillance that they had on him told Border Patrol, Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, that this gentleman was coming from Australia. And he was flagged because he had written some anti-Trump pieces when he was reporting on the Columbia University protests between Gaza and Iran. If you remember correctly, Donald Trump is now all over Columbia University. So the interesting part is that, and this is in your story too, and I laughed when I read this, is that when they basically said, hey, listen, we got to let you go, but there is, of course, this drug charge we could get you on. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Drugs. He's like, well, we went through your phone. We found a picture of you buying gummies in New York, where, by
Yeah.
the way, weed is 100% fucking legal.
Yeah.
And so we can actually charge you for that. And he's like, no, you can't. He's like, I bought those in a state where you can buy legal weed, and I ate them in that state, and I no longer have them because I've already eaten them. And they're like, okay, well, we'll let you go this time, but you need to leave the country immediately.
They said
His
that he lied on
crime,
his form.
yeah.
That was the thing. He lied on his form about his drug use, which was, negligible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
But here's the thing is that they knew he was coming.
Mhm.
They made his life miserable. They made an example out of him. This is a fucking NATO country. This is an ally. This is Australia. This is some like 28-year-old white guy from Australia that was writing sympathetic pieces about protesters and pieces that were antithetical to what Donald Trump seems to think is appropriate when it comes to treating people that he disagrees with great physical violence and disdain. Those were the articles that he wrote about what he's seeing, and
Yeah.
none of it, it wasn't a war drum. It wasn't him advocating violence in any of the pieces.
Yeah.
And if you've read anything about this gentleman, he's this like stand-up young man who is empathetic to both sides of the equation when it comes to Israel and Gaza. And he was just documenting, the university experience of not having free speech and
Mhm.
what happened. And they fucking targeted him for weeks. Dude, I am like deathly afraid to think of what they have on us.
Well, chilling, really. But it does tell you that the surveillance system that they've now implemented, which is either Palantir or this other thing called Dragon, is doing its rounds, and it's being very effectively used against everybody that's coming into the country. So if you're filing a visa application, you can rest assured that they are diving into your social media posts. They aren't building a profile of you. They're probably cross-referencing that against all the other data they may have against you. There is nothing more invasive and more un-American than what is happening right now with the surveillance system that they're introducing. This has become a state that it feels nothing for profiling people just for their arrival in the United States. Well, who wants to arrive at a country and know that your entire life's been profiled, by Palantir and another big brother sort of, machine that's basically saying, everything that you've ever tried to keep secret from the world is out there for them to see. And the idea that a journalist, deserves certain protections because it is very easy to target journalists with all sorts of false accusations, including this drug charge. I mean, someone on the chat was talking about how the Kremlin loves to do this. The Kremlin loves to plant drugs on journalists because it's so easy to then arrest them on drug charges. And the thing that journalists, I don't even think you can arrest a journalist or charge a journalist in. Maybe this has changed, but in Canada, I don't think you get to charge journalists unless the prime minister actually says, "I understand why that's going to happen. Let's do it," because in most cases, it's the easiest thing to do is to frame somebody for committing a crime. But in the United States, it's not only legal, apparently, you can deport somebody, to turn up their entire life and send them back home because of the work that they do. Now, this guy had a small following on Substack. Maybe it's 2,000 people now. I can't imagine what it was before. It must have been negligible. And yet they found this article, and yet they profiled him, and yet they said that he couldn't come in. Well, what? And they waited for him. You know how many man hours? You know how many dollars went into?
Dude, for weeks. Yeah, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars went into them casing this fucking student Substack journalist from Australia who was planning a trip to the United States of America so he could experience it because he wrote a couple of pieces that really upset the regime. Like, that's fucking Russia, China shit, dude. Like, that's where we are. This is like, we're full on FSB, Chinese Secret Service. You wrote something, you get apprehended at the border because their dear leader just didn't fucking like it. Like, that's where we're at. And you're watching it like these, and here's the thing is that anybody can kind of hide behind the word journalist. Like Heather Cox Richardson, God bless her, called me a journalist in her piece the other day, which was really lovely. She then corrected it and said shock jock, which I'm also not, but whatever. Um, but anybody can hide behind that moniker now, and you see people do that. There's people in Canada that have LARPed as journalists. Now, I'm fortunate because I've got 20 years doing a morning show at a big radio station in the city of Toronto, so I could feasibly probably call myself a
Yes,
journalist, but I
I think you could.
refuse to. Like, it's just not one of those things. But you have complete and utter fucking wastes of space, like this guy named the pleb truck driver or Cat Canada,
Yeah.
people who were out of luck, out of time, out of options, who turned to YouTube and called themselves fucking journalists, and they spew hate that they should get arrested for. So, I'm of the opinion that, hey, listen, we should probably have some standards when it comes to who calls themselves a fucking journalist, and we should probably have some standards when it comes to who we identify as media outlets.
Mhm.
I don't think, and Elon Musk says this all the time, you're a journalist. If you're on X, you're the news now. No, you're fucking not.
No, you're not.
Like, you're just not. There are
He
people
isn't a
who are
journalist either. So
no, fuck no. He's not a
yeah.
newspaper. He's not a news outlet. He said that the other day. He's like, we're the number one news app in Canada. No, you weren't. You weren't even the fucking top 100, by the way. But, you got to temper all of that shit with, the idea that you can still write something, like, you can still put something out. Like, a guy with 2,000 followers on
Mhm.
Substack is not a journalist. I'm sorry, he's not. But you should be allowed to put something out. Call yourself whatever the fuck you want and not get deported for it because someone in a government that you went to visit didn't like it. Like, that's just fucking fascism. That is hardcore socialist, fascist, autocracy stuff. And Obama said it the other day, and I'm sure we're going to get to it. He's like, "We're on the fucking verge of an autocracy." Well, look at these stories. Of course we are.
Mhm.
Of course we are.
Yeah, look, I will disagree with you. I think people who call themselves journalists and do proper journalism and there are a lot of independent journalists out there, especially on Substack, that need protection. And a lot of the greatest work right now is coming out of Substack. You're not seeing the New York Times or the Washington Post break all the big stories. It's people on Substack that are doing it, and it's a very interesting case that if Substack is now being actively surveilled by the U.S. administration and obviously are targeting journalists or people who are posting on Substack. That is a significant development because there are very few places that independent journalists can go and work and publish and earn a living. Substack happens to be one of them. And it's worrying to me that, the U.S. administration, Donald Trump is busy, sending his AI trolls and monitoring everything that we're doing on Substack. That is not the place for the government. That is not where the government belongs. There is a fourth estate in America, and the fourth estate is meant to be independent. It's not meant to be under the surveillance of the Trump administration, the DOJ, the ICE, or Palantir, or any of these other organizations that they've now digitally surveilling all our work. It's not how it's meant to work. The fourth estate exists to report on the other three so we can ensure that we have a proper functioning democracy. And we're just, no one seems to be as fired up about this, but I think people should start getting fired up about it because it's going to start with this journalist with 2,000 people who's a student as well. So there's many reasons around that. But you got to know they're all over Substack. That's basically what they're saying is that they're surveilled. I don't even know if anyone had really read half of the stuff that he had put out there, but the AI crawlers, they read it, and the government found out about it, which is which tells you how in deep they are and how much of Substack they must be looking through in order to identify people and their beliefs.
Oh, listen, for 1 second, I mean, I want to make the separation between journalism and not journalism, and people that hide behind those people behind that word journalist, because there are some terrible people who do it. That
Yeah.
should be a point of distinction. But 100% completely agree with you. Is that the best information is coming out of independent
Mm.
journalists? The best writing is coming out of Substack. The best content, unfiltered, that you have access to is right here, and we see the reward for it, whether it's our followings, whether it is, in people sharing stories, sharing the news, sharing our insights, sharing facts that we give people. And I tell people that in a lot of my posts. I'm like, hey, listen, don't just believe me. Go out and fact check this story and others. But make sure that you follow independent journalists, because if it wasn't for independent journalism, no King's Day would not have happened. If it wasn't for independent journalism, you wouldn't know anything about the truth when it comes to what's going on in Los Angeles, when it comes to ICE raids. If it wasn't for independent people, and you're seeing a lot of really legitimate mainstream media people, whether it's Jim Acosta, whether it's Katie Couric, Katie Fang, you're seeing so many big time names. Terry Moran is now over at Substack. Go to Substack, not just because of the functionality, but because they get a chance to interact with you, and there's nothing like it. And so now you've got the state deeply embedded into this app that is really the only outlet for so many people who Donald Trump has pushed off of mainstream media, like Jim Acosta, like Terry Moran, now being surveilled and attacked in the only home where they can go and monetize their careers and make a living. It's
Mhm.
truly fucking remarkable that we live in
Yeah,
the time we
it's
live in.
really sick. I mean, I don't know what the thing to do is, but people should. I don't know if it's Substack that should challenge the government and why they're doing this, or whether there are other journalism organizations that should say hands
Mark
off.
Andreessen owns Substack, so I don't know that
Funds
that's
that
going to
funds it.
happen anytime. Yeah,
Yes, yeah, I know, I know. Thank you for pointing that out.
you're welcome.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
Hi,
that.
Mark.
Hey, how you
He
doing?
blocked me on Twitter. I've never even interacted with the guy, but he did
Oh,
block me on
really?
Twitter. So
I don't think he's a fan
I'm
of
just
mine
happy
either.
that I'm still here and he hasn't turned the lights out, to be honest with you.
Well, if it's on one thing, it's the other. It could happen one day, right?
Yeah.
Let's move to the number one story, which you talked about. Oh, yes, this is the number one story because we skipped the number two story. The number one story is all about Barack Obama making an urgent warning about autocracy. He says that he's sorry, it was in Hartford, Connecticut, actually, that he did this. He said America is dangerously close to normalizing autocratic behavior, and that democracy is probably as weak as it's been since I've been alive, meaning he's been alive. That is a dramatic comment from the man who, was one of the shining lights of any American presidencies. He said that what's happening is that we now have a situation that which we're all going to be tested in some way, and we're going to have them decide what our commitments, and we're going to have to decide what our commitments are. It'll be uncomfortable for a time, but that's how you know it's a commitment, because you do it when it's hard, not just when it's easy, not just when it's trendy, not just when it's cool. The former president of the United States is saying that America is close to becoming an autocracy.
Mm. I read that today, and then I read an article on The Guardian that talked about Trump's march towards authoritarianism at light speed.
Mhm.
And traditionally, presidents don't say much about what other presidents do, but you have Barack Obama not just ringing a bell, you've got him standing there waving his hands furiously, telling everybody it's D-Day. Like the autocracy doomsday clock is hitting midnight right now. Like it's
Mhm.
bing, 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 bing. And, um, if you didn't know that already by the visuals coming out of Los Angeles, coming out of, migrant neighborhoods, coming out of fields and, meat packing plants, watching Americans literally have their dignity, human rights, habeas corpus rights stripped from them, watching, Afghan interpreters that worked with the U.S. military get pulled out of their houses and sent back to Afghanistan. If you didn't if you didn't think that this was happening just from those pictures, visuals, announcements, emergency orders, like the one that happened today, where Donald Trump and the Trump regime said they were going to shut down the LGBTQSQSI suicide hotline in the United States. They're going to shut that down on the 17th of
Oh,
July. Um, you wouldn't need these warnings from guys like Barack Obama. You wouldn't need, articles like the one I read at The Guardian talking about how the United States is literally in the throes of turning it over to an authoritarian, for a police state, surveillance state, authoritarian state, an autocracy. That's what we're
mhm.
talking about here, a dictatorship. And smarter people than me have been waving their hands about this for a very, very long time. And we're fortunate that we get to document it, but it doesn't make it any less sad.
Mm,
It doesn't make what's happening to America any less depressing for Canadians, and I'm Canadian. Doesn't make it any less terrifying knowing that that man who I watched blither away through a flag raising ceremony yesterday, not being able to put a sentence together, has the nuclear codes. Doesn't
mhm,
make the world feel very comfortable at the moment.
mm,
But Barack Obama's, assessment was right, is that you're going to have to look inward. At this point, every American is going to have to decide what's important to them. Is standing up for the values that you know to be true and sustainable, whether they be progressive or not. Is that important to you? Is your neighbor important to you? Or is your pocketbook important to you? Or is looking macho important to you? Is lying important to you? Is telling the truth important to you? Is siding with evil important to you? Or siding with values and virtues important to you? Like, those are legitimately the decisions you're going to have to start making, and they're going to come with a cost
mhm,
in the United States of America. We dodged a bullet up here in Canada, not
mhm.
electing Pierre Poilievre, the other populist asshole that almost ran the table. So we've got a guy with values and virtues that is helping Canadians make better decisions. That is showing us the way to be a better human being. And we watched that at the end of the G7. You watched Donald Trump go up there, make a fool of himself, leave. Then you watched values and virtues just continue to win the day. And I feel sorry for America, but Barack Obama didn't need to say any of that, to me. I saw it, and I hope you took him seriously. If you've been ignoring the visuals, I hope you've taken the words of that man very seriously today, and I hope you take articles like the one I read in the Guardian and the one we've got coming out at deanblundell.substack.com later on today very seriously, because I do not disagree, and I don't think any person in their right mind with the ability to put two and two together would disagree that America is in very, very deep trouble right now.
Indeed. So it's really well said. There's also a call to action that's in his speech, in his address, that needs to be heard. I mean, he basically said that democracy doesn't just, function without people participating in democracy. It needs people to activate themselves, whether it's people inside the government or people outside the government or people in civil society. He said there has to be a response and pushback from civil society, from various institutions and individuals outside of government, but also people inside of government who say, no, you can't do that. Within parties, no, you can't do that. And that pushback needs to get louder and louder and louder, because this is a pivotal time, and I have no doubt Americans are going to succeed in regaining their democratic footing. I have no doubt of that, but it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take a real willpower. It's going to be reaching to the very depth of your soul, and it's going to have that. You're going to have to find that moment, that pain, or that whatever it is that's causing you all this anger right now. This current government, you're going to have to turn it around, and you're going to have to build something better out of this. And there is a way out of this. We're seeing it in Hungary today, as Orban might be facing his defeat. That is quite a significant thing. If he can be defeated, Trump can be defeated. And what it's going to require is a lot of very smart awareness of everything that's going on right now. We have the evidence around how much autocracy is available in this country right now is massive. I mean, we on the Trump tyranny tracker every
Yeah,
day.
you don't need many more receipts, do
Yeah,
we?
their
Yeah.
receipts are there. They're just endless. So we know it's here. We know it's going to be coming at us at an even greater pace. Now is the time, wherever you can, however you can, you have to push back against this autocratic government. And that means finding the small ways to push back, the small resistance ways, which could mean the things you do in your job, as Obama's suggesting. If you're in government and they're asking you to do something you shouldn't do, resist it. You can say no. You're still an individual if it's against the law. The same thing goes for every single person in every job that they have. And resist the temptation to fall for these red herrings they put out there, these things like immigration and the undocumented workers and all this other stuff. It's bullshit. All of that is just designed to, appeal to your core inner insecurities and your own core inner, frailties, I guess. But the LGBT community is not going to destroy America. The undocumented workers are not going to destroy America. What's going to destroy America is the autocrats that are currently running America, that are going to lead us into endless wars, that are going to keep corrupting their way through our system like a cancer. I mean, the amount of corruption that's going on right now, unregulated corruption, day in and day out, where they're just handing out contracts to every crony organization and they can find. I mean, if your name is not Musk or Thiel, do you get a contract anymore out of the U.S. government, or do you have to have those names in order to get a contract from the U.S. government? This has been the ultimate disgraceful authoritarian takeover of a democracy you've ever seen. But we need to push back, and we need to push back really hard right now because it's coming, and every day we let it continue, the deeper it is and the harder it is for us to get out of that hole, because they will keep pounding at us through these these censorship rules, or what they did with Alistair Kitchen over there. They'll keep coming at us with even more and more attempts to take away our rights, shooting at protesters and journalists at the protests the other day. I mean, we've come to a point where, if we want the truth to survive in America, we have to take action to protect it.
Yeah, well said. And then there's that that media angle, right? It's they're coming for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a migrant. It doesn't matter if you're a Substack writer. It doesn't matter if you're Terry Moran, who's basically reporter emeritus. I mean, guy had a job for life if he wanted one, and he got fired because Trump's like, I don't like that guy. He said something nasty about me and my people. This is how democracy dies. You've heard it a million times. So hang in there, friends. If there's one piece of advice I have for you, it's hang in there and look inward. What can you do in those little microaggressions that you can control? What do you control and what do you not control? You don't control what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. You control what you do with your hands, your body, your mind. So stay strong, America. And Canada, same with you. God bless you, Canadians. You picked a good one. We didn't have to go through this too. So there you go.
Hopefully. Yeah. That is the FiveStack for today. It is Thursday, June 19th. We shall be back tomorrow for a Friday edition. And everyone should check out deanblundell.substack.com for all this great reporting about Donald Trump and his illness, but also about his democracy piece that's coming out later this afternoon. And on narrative.org, you can read my report about Alistair Kitchen, the reporter that was deported. Plus, all my surveillance stuff is on there about how these companies are busy building a surveillance state. It's going to be very hard for us to get.
Yeah, apparently it's working already.
Apparently it's there. Well, I'm worried about elections going forward. I mean, that seems to be the biggest threat right now. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.